Hey everyone, welcome to another hot take. This one is a doozy. I've talked to a lot of people, I don't know a lot, but a few people who support Antifa or claim to be in Antifa. And part of the reason I did that is I was trying to I was a little bit inspired by Daryl Davis, he's the guy who talked to the Klan members, tried to get them out of the life, try to get people out of extremism. And his rule of thumb was just keep talking, as long as you're talking, you're not fighting each other. So I tried to open up a dialogue online, but it's very tough online because people are so mean and they're anonymous and they tend to get very snippy if they lose, especially in a political argument. But, one of the topics I kept saying is, and I've said this in the comics, in the anti-war comic, is part of the problem with Antifa is even if you believe they're all altruistic, wonderful people who are going to do nothing but good, they don't have a hierarchy. They don't have any kind of training, and nobody knows who each other is. And I'm part of the anti-war movement, sort of loosely. And it was very easy in the anti-war movement to pick out infiltrators, because typically infiltrators are law enforcement, FBI guys, and they're trying to start trouble. And the kind of trouble they start tends to be more violent, right? They say, let's burn down this place, or let's, start a fight, or, nothing that blatant. But they tend to push the crazy stuff. And people in the anti-war community, they're not interested in that. So Antifa, having embraced political violence, really opened themselves up because they're open to violence, number one, and number two, they have no hierarchy, and number three, basically anybody with a hoodie and a face thing can join. You could say you're in Antifa. There's nothing stopping you. So if you support Antifa or you're a member of Antifa, you have to take partial responsibility for what you're about to see here. As you can see, it's an old woman with a walker. This is in Canada. And look at it. There's members of Antifa, and they're standing in front of her. They're screaming at her. She's an old woman, a frail old woman. And they're pointing and screaming like maniacs. And they're blocking an old woman from going anywhere. I mean, I don't know who that old woman was. Maybe she's a bad old woman. I somehow doubt it. But at that age, I mean, you're risking a chance. You might kill her. She could fall over and die. Someone that old, someone that frail, they fall, they could die. Or they could, have an injury that would basically last as long as they had left on Earth. They could be bedridden for the rest of their time on Earth, which in a lot of ways is even worse. They hit their head, they're done. So, and what would happen... Now, that was in Canada. I'm not too familiar with the laws in Canada, but they're pretty similar to the United States in a lot of ways. There would be a murder investigation, and anyone connected to Antifa could be charged. At least in the United States, you could be charged for conspiracy. If you commit a crime, if you commit a house robbery, right? You and three of your friends break into a house, and someone in the house shoots one of your friends and kills them. The two surviving robbers are charged with murder. Not the person who defended themselves. The robbers caused the murder. And this is what's eventually going to happen to Antifa. Something horrible is going to happen. And if you're a member of Antifa or you support Antifa, are you really in it to yell at old women? I don't think you are. This whole point of Antifa was to stop fascism. I don't think you can argue that a frail woman on a walker is somehow promoting fascism. I don't think you can sensibly argue that. The other thing, too, is this. You're going to be infiltrated. Because eventually, and it takes a while, the FBI, local law enforcement, they get caught up in these various trends, just like anybody else. Now, the previous trend after September 11th was Middle Eastern terrorism, right? So, the worry was Middle Easterners coming here, blowing things up, and also, additionally, the worry was, whoa, are you going to profile Muslims? The bottom line is they found ways to A, justify their budget, whatever it was, and B, to justify their entire existence, as an organization, whether it's the FBI or local law enforcement. So what they do is they arrest people. That's what they do. And they arrest people whether they're guilty people or not. So with Middle Eastern terrorism, what did they do? Oh, excuse me one sec. Joan, you're being a little pest. Sorry. Joan's just off camera, like wanting to get down. They set up these stings, fake bombs, with a lot of times mentally ill people, and they drag them in. And, they send them to jail for a very long time. There's a case, it was in New Jersey, Fort Dix, right? The Fort Dix guys. And what had happened was, this was actually former Governor Christie worked on this prosecution. They convinced these Middle Eastern guys, normal guys, these guys weren't radicals, but they were gun enthusiasts. So they convinced them, their CI, their confidential informant, another guy who they had some charges hanging over, to go in and convince these guys to buy and I think rent guns that they weren't legally allowed to have as foreign nationals because they were gun enthusiasts. And it got them into a ton of trouble. So this is the kind of stuff they do. And eventually, Antifa is going to make that list. And when they do, it's going to be easy pickings for them. Because the first few times, they're going to send some undercover guys. They're going to find the youngest guys in their local law enforcement or the FBI, and they're going to say, okay, dress up as Antifa and infiltrate these idiots, and let's see what we can get them to do. And they're going to do it, and they're going to get everybody gung-ho about burning down a house of somebody they perceive as racist or whatever. It doesn't matter. The important thing is they get to arrest a lot of people. So when that happens, when they get everybody to agree with it, even though they don't know their names, they're going to set the whole thing up. Everybody's going to show up. All the Antifa guys are going to show up for this thing they think they're going to rally for and then run away. Only this time, the cops will be ready for you. And they're going to round everybody up, and you're all going to jail. Like real jail. Because they're going to charge you with conspiracy. They may charge you with the RICO Act. They may charge you, it depends on what you guys all agreed to do. If you agreed to burn down some place, arson, if you agreed to, raid some place or whatever you agreed to do, you're in big trouble. And they're not going to care. Okay? They're not going to care that you're some college student who's never done anything. They're there to justify the FBI and local law enforcement. They're going to call you terrorist. Because that's what you are. Because you put on masks and you plan to commit violence. Political violence. And that cycle will continue when they're done with Antifa. Now, right now, one could argue that the forces behind the scenes, maybe in the FBI or CIA or whomever, want you guys around to stir up trouble for Trump because they don't like Trump. Don't kid yourself. The law enforcement community does not like Trump, especially the FBI, CIA, and NSA. Because on the campaign trail, Trump actually suggested consolidating all those groups into one big thing. And they went apoplectic about it. Because that would cut into their budgets, into their power. People would lose their jobs. People would be forced to retire. That's not happening as long as they have power to wield. And they have a tremendous amount of it. So, but at some point, probably after the election, they're going to decide, these Antifa idiots, they're perfect. They're perfect. We could just lure them into any kind of trap, and they'll fall right into it. Because they have no hierarchy, they have no training. Now, a lot of you think, well, I'll just run away, and they won't catch me because I don't have anything on my face. Well, depending on the seriousness, there are cameras everywhere, even in Portland. So unless you've had your mask on from the point at which you got on camera to the time at which you left, which is really hard to do, they're going to find you. And even if they don't, let's say you're really smart. You keep your mask on the whole time, but you had to have talked to someone. Someone knows you were there. And that someone might be sweated out underneath police interrogation. And it's not a bunch of college students that sweating you out. It's professionals. They know how to interrogate people. And it could be one of your good friends. They could be facing prison time, real prison time. They could be caught for something else. That's how they get CIs, right? They want to get a guy in Antifa. They start trolling the Antifa guys, see who they are. They run checks on them. And then they find a guy with like 2 strikes against him. And then they pull him over in a traffic stop, and they find, I don't know, some pot. Maybe they find some cocaine on him, some crack, or whatever. Whatever he does, you know that guy in your group. He's right on the edge. He's a maniac, and you like him, and he's in the group, and he kind of parties a little too hard. But that's not your problem, right? It isn't until the government turns him into an informant, and he's in your group, and you already know him and trust him. You see? So not only will they have undercover guys, they will eventually have CIs everywhere, because there are a lot of members of Antifa that claim to be. And it's not just going to be outside in real life, it's going to be online too. So this kind of stuff, you beating up on old ladies, well, not beating up, but you know what I mean, is going to turn the public against you. Not that they already aren't pretty much against you, but that doesn't help. That just makes you more visible and less, nobody's going to come to your defense eventually. You think Chris Cuomo is going to come to your defense after something like this? No. You think Chris Cuomo is going to come to your defense after 12 members of Antifa beat up 2 Marines and put them in the hospital, including one Marine who was a person of color? No. Antifa, members, supporters, stop. Okay? Get out now. Because this kind of behavior, it's indefensible. And no one's going to come to your aid when law enforcement decide to use you as a justification for their budget. You'll be done.